I knew something was off the second my boots hit the dirt. My name's Travis Langley, and 3 weeks ago, I inherited my dad's ranch 200 acres of open land outside of Pine Rock, Texas. My old man kept that land wild and free, just the way he liked it. But when I pulled up the gravel road after a 10-hour drive, I didn't see the old barn first. I saw a damn flagpole with a gleaming HOA logo flapping in the wind. Then came the real gut punch. Where the south pasture should have been, there was a manicured green stretching 100 yards, dotted with golf carts and middle-aged men in polos. A crisp white clubhouse stood where my dad's hay shed used to be. I swear I could still smell the diesel and hay, but now it was covered up by the scent of overpriced lavender from the clubhouse spa. "What the hell?" I muttered, slamming the truck door shut. "Excuse me," came a voice behind me, sharp, nasal, and way too entitled for someone standing on my family's land. I turned to see her. Platinum blonde bob haircut, oversized sunglasses, and a clipboard clutched like it was a weapon. She wore a pink cardigan tied around her neck like she was headed to a country club in Beverly Hills, not rural Texas. "I don't believe you're allowed to park here," she barked. I stared at her. "I'm Travis Langley." "This is my ranch." She blinked, then gave a tight little laugh like I'd told a joke she didn't get. "Oh, sweetie. No, this is part of the Whispering Pines HOA grounds now. We acquired it last year. You must be confused." "I'm not confused," I said flatly. "This land's been in my family since 1952. My father passed last month and left it to me. You're the one who's confused if you think this is yours." Her smile vanished like someone flipped a switch. "I'm Marlene Prescott, president of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association," she said, as if I should salute. "And I can assure you, Mr. Langley, everything was done legally. We expanded the HOA boundary to include this property after your father stopped paying taxes." "That's a lie," I snapped. "My dad paid his taxes every year. I've got the records, federal and county." She paused for half a second too long. Then she said, "Well, perhaps you should take that up with the board. But as of now, the clubhouse is operating, the golf course is scheduled for a tournament this weekend, and I'd advise you to leave before you're trespassing." I laughed loud and hard. "Lady, you're standing on my land. You built a golf course on my property and you think I'm trespassing?" She narrowed her eyes. "You're being hostile." "I'm being calm," I said, stepping closer. "You'll know when I'm being hostile." That night I didn't sleep. I stayed in my dad's old cabin, which thankfully hadn't been touched, probably because it sat on the far north end of the property, hidden by a tree line. I dug through file boxes and found every tax record, deed, and survey my father had ever kept. And sure enough, every document confirmed the same thing. This land was ours, still zoned agricultural and never ever under HOA jurisdiction. So how the hell did they build a golf course and a clubhouse on it? The next morning, I walked the property line, snapping photos. The golf course extended nearly 50 acres into the ranch. The clubhouse had plumbing and electrical lines illegally installed through our land. And the kicker? They'd bulldozed the old pond and filled it in to build a damn parking lot. By mid-afternoon, I was at the county recorder's office. The clerk, a guy named Wade, nearly choked on his coffee when I showed him the map. "Wait, they built all this. That's not HOA land," he said. "Langley Ranch was never annexed. There's no record of any boundary expansion." I grinned. "That's what I thought." Wade leaned in. "You didn't hear this from me, but Marlene Prescott's got a cousin in zoning. There've been complaints before, quiet ones. Folks too scared to push back." "Not me," I said. "I'm not scared." I left the office with copies of every zoning map and boundary record I could carry. That night, I set up trail cams around the property. If they were sneaking around at night, moving stakes or destroying evidence, I'd catch them. Marlene thought she could steamroll a Langley. She had no idea who she was dealing with. HOA story, HOA stories, Homeowners Association stories. By the third day, I'd filled 2 full legal pads with notes, coordinates, timestamps, and a list of license plates from the trail cams. I wasn't just gathering evidence, I was building a case. The kind you don't walk away from with a fine and a slap on the wrist. Late that afternoon, I drove to the Pine Rock Planning Commission, not the zoning office. I'd already hit that. This was the records vault where every permit, blueprint, and public notice was stored. The clerk, a thin man with a wandering eye and a habit of clearing his throat every 10 seconds, led me into the back. I gave him the parcel number and waited while he sifted through filing drawers. After 10 minutes, he emerged with a slim folder. "This is all we've got on that parcel," he said. I opened it. 2 pages. A septic inspection from 3 years ago and a permit request dated 8 months back for temporary recreational use. The applicant, Whispering Pines HOA, there was a small signature at the bottom. Approved by Interim Supervisor J. Connolly? I didn't recognize the name, so I asked the clerk. "Connolly," he said. "He filled in for about 3 weeks last summer. Real short stint, something about a family emergency, haven't seen him since." I took a photo of the permit and made a mental note. Whoever this Connolly was, he'd green-lit a multi-million-dollar development with a single scribble. And if he disappeared right after, it didn't smell like coincidence. Before leaving, I asked for one more thing: a list of all complaints filed against Whispering Pines in the last 2 years. The clerk hesitated. "I can't give you the actual complaints," he said, "but I can tell you how many there were." "All right," I said. "How many?" He tapped a few keys on his keyboard. 14, mostly about fencing, noise, and water diversion, all closed without action. I didn't say anything. Just nodded and walked out. That night, I drove to the far fence line. The moon was high, casting silver light across the dry grass. I crouched near a utility box that had been recently installed: new wires, fresh conduit. I opened the panel and took a photo of the serial number. Then I followed the line with a flashlight until I found where it crossed onto my land about 30 yards past the official utility easement. That was theft. Plain and simple. They were pulling power from a grid extension that didn't legally serve their development. The next morning, I walked into the sheriff's office with a folder under one arm and a gas station coffee in the other. Sheriff Boone was a thick-necked man with a buzz cut and a voice like gravel. He'd known my dad back in the day but hadn't been out to the ranch in years. He glanced up when I stepped in. "Langley, I heard you were back. Sorry about your old man," I nodded. "Appreciate it. I need a few minutes of your time." We sat in his office and I laid everything out. The maps, photos of the illegal power lines, the permit signed by a ghost employee. The zoning maps that proved the land was never annexed. Boone listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and rubbed his chin. "This ain't small potatoes, Travis. What you're telling me, that's fraud, trespassing. Maybe even criminal mischief, depending on how they went about it." "I'm not just telling you," I said. "I'm showing you," he nodded slowly. "All right, I'll send someone out to verify what you've got, but I'll tell you this: Marlene's husband plays poker with the DA. Don't expect things to move quick." "I'm not expecting quick," I said. "I'm expecting right." He didn't promise anything, which I respected, but when I left, I saw 2 deputies loading a drone kit into a cruiser. That was enough for now. The next time I saw Marlene was 2 days later at the edge of the so-called Pudding Green. She was talking to a landscaper with a tablet in his hand, probably arguing over turf dye or sprinkler schedules. I waited until he walked off, then stepped onto the grass. She turned, her expression ice cold. "You again? I thought we'd settled this." "You thought wrong," I said. "The sheriff's office is investigating. You might want to start prepping your board members for depositions." She didn't flinch. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I held up my phone, flicking through the photos. "Illegal utility connections, unauthorized construction, fraudulent permits. That's not a bluff, Marlene. That's a file folder with your name all over it." She pursed her lips, then glanced around like someone might overhear. "You have no idea what you're doing." "Actually," I said, "I do, and I'm just getting warmed up." That night I got a call from a blocked number. I almost let it go to voicemail but picked up out of instinct. A man's voice, low and flat, said, "You'd be smart to stop digging." I didn't respond. He continued, "You think this is about land? It's not. It's bigger than you. Walk away." Then he hung up. I saved the recording and forwarded it to Sheriff Boone. The next morning, I got a visit from a woman named Dana Ortiz. She introduced herself as a field agent with the State Attorney General's office. Apparently, Boone had sent my evidence up the chain, and someone in Austin had taken an interest. "I want to walk the property with you," she said, "and I need to see every document you've got." So we did. Over the next 2 hours, we trekked from the parking lot to the clubhouse to the far irrigation trench that cut across the old cattle trail. Dana took photos, marked coordinates, and jotted notes on a tablet that logged GPS data in real time. When we got back to the cabin, she asked me something I hadn't expected. "You know anyone who might have had access to your father's mail, tax records?" I frowned. "A caretaker came by once a week to check on him. Name's Ruddy. He's been around since I was a kid." "Why?" She looked uneasy. "Because someone filed a change of address form 6 months before your father passed. Mail was being redirected to a P.O. box in San Antonio." That landed like a punch. "He never mentioned that." "Most people wouldn't," she said, "especially if they never knew about it." She left with a stack of copies and promised to keep me updated. I watched her car disappear down the road, wondering how deep this thing really went. That night, I noticed one of the trail cams had been ripped off its post. The mount was snapped clean and the SD card was gone, but they'd missed the backup lens I'd mounted in the oak tree 30 feet away. I checked the footage. A man in a gray hoodie, face turned away from the camera, had walked straight to the post, yanked the camera down and tossed it in a duffel bag. But he made one mistake. He parked too close. The plate was visible on the front of the truck. I ran it through a private database I had access to through a buddy in Dallas. The truck was registered to Connor Price, HOA board treasurer. The next morning, I filed a property destruction report with the sheriff, attached the footage, and printed a fresh copy of the land deed to post on the clubhouse door. I nailed it right into the wood with a single line underneath, handwritten in red marker. "You built this on stolen land." They wanted to play dirty, fine. I'd buried fence posts in dust storms, wrangled cattle in tornadoes, and gutted engines with nothing but a crescent wrench and prayer. They had no idea who they were messing with. I woke up to the sound of tires crunching gravel, slow, deliberate. I stepped onto the porch with a cup of black coffee, still hot from the percolator. A white sedan with government plates pulled up just past the gate. 2 men stepped out, both in suits that didn't belong anywhere near a ranch. One carried a hard-edged leather case, the other had a manila envelope under his arm. "You Travis Langley?" the taller one asked. I nodded. "That's right." He flashed a badge with the state seal. "Special Investigator Royce, Public Integrity Bureau. This is Agent McClintock from the Financial Crimes Division." I motioned them inside. They didn't waste time on pleasantries. McClintock opened the envelope and slid a copy of a forged deed across the table. "This was filed with the county clerk's office under your father's name 4 months before he passed," he said. I studied it closely. The signature wasn't even close to my dad's. The notary stamp was from a firm based out of Houston, 150 miles away. There was no way he'd driven that far, especially not in the condition he was in during that time. Royce pointed to the corner. "That's the notary's ID. Belongs to someone named Darcy Lynn Evers. She filed a statement 2 days ago saying she'd never met your father. Claimed she was paid to stamp a stack of documents by a man named Carlton Baines." "Who's that?" I asked. "Real estate acquisitions consultant. Works under Whispering Pines Development Trust, which, surprise, shares a board with your HOA and Baines. He's under investigation in 2 other counties for similar schemes." I leaned back in my chair. "So they forged a deed, ran a shady permit through a temp supervisor, and built a luxury setup on top of it." Royce nodded. "The clubhouse and golf course were collateral." They've been using them to qualify for community infrastructure grants meant for underserved rural developments. That's federal money, Langley. We're talking wire fraud, not just zoning violations. McClintock added, we've already frozen one of their accounts and traced over $400,000 in redirected funds. There are signs of money laundering through shell vendors' landscaping companies that don't exist, consulting fees paid to offshore banks. We're going to need your cooperation going forward. You've got it, I said. Every square foot of that land is mine, and I want them held accountable for every inch they took. Later that afternoon, Royce and McClintock returned to town to coordinate with the district prosecutor. I stayed behind, went straight to the shed, and dug out the old trail maps my dad kept rolled in PVC tubes. The original fence lines, irrigation ditches, and grazing routes were all marked in fading red grease pencil. I wanted them ready for court. Around dusk, I drove to the edge of the clubhouse property again, this time wearing a body cam my cousin, a game warden, had mailed me. I stopped by the putting green, where a man in a blazer was fitting in a few swings under the last of the daylight. His tie was tucked into his shirt, and he had the calm swagger of someone who thought he owned the place. You must be Carlton Baines, I said. He straightened up slowly. And you are the actual owner of the land you're squatting on. He didn't even blink. I'm not in the mood for hillbilly theatrics. I walked right up to him and held up my phone. This conversation's being recorded, just so you know. You're on private property and you're profiting off stolen land using a forged deed. You want to deny that into the camera, he chuckled and set his club aside. You've got no idea what kind of people you're playing with. You're right, I said, but the Texas Attorney General's office does. And so does the FBI's white-collar crimes unit, who got tipped off about your grant fraud 3 days ago. His jaw tightened just slightly. I lowered my voice. You think you're the first slick-haired developer to try pulling a land grab on a legacy ranch. You're not even original. He turned and walked off without another word. I filmed every step until he disappeared around the back of the clubhouse. That night, I called Dana Ortiz. She'd been working late and answered on the second ring. They tried to transfer ownership to a Nevada-based holding company this morning, she said. We froze that too, but now they're lawyering up big firm out of Dallas. I don't care how many suits they throw at this, I said. I want them out. Every golf flag, every bench, every concrete slab gone. You'll get that, Dana said. But first, we need something bigger, something we can take statewide to show this wasn't a one-off. If you know anyone who's been threatened or paid off, now's the time to talk. After we hung up, I drove to Ruddy's trailer just outside town. He'd taken care of my father for years. If anyone noticed strange mail or unexplained visitors, it would be him. He opened the door in an old flannel shirt and looked surprised to see me. They came to me, he said before I even asked. Couple months before your dad passed. 2 men dressed like they were selling insurance. Asked if they could facilitate a transition of the ranch. I told them to get off the property. You tell my dad. He was already getting forgetful. I didn't want to stress him, Ruddy said quietly. Figured they'd go away if I stood firm. Guess I was wrong. I felt that in my chest. Did they threaten you? They offered money. $5,000 just to keep quiet. I slammed the door in their face. I asked if he'd testify. He nodded. Damn right I will. The next morning, I delivered a sworn affidavit from Ruddy to Dana's office. By noon, she had a warrant request in front of a judge. And by evening, the clubhouse was swarming with state agents in windbreakers, locking filing cabinets and seizing hard drives. Marlene showed up in a Mercedes just before sunset. She tried to push past the tape, but a uniformed officer stopped her cold. I watched from a distance as realization washed over her face, not panic, not yet, but the slow unraveling of someone who just realized the world had teeth. I stayed quiet, didn't approach. Let it sink in. The following week was a blur of depositions and legal motions. Royce called to tell me that a grand jury had been convened and indictments were likely. Carlton Baines had already skipped town, but his bank records were damning. Marlene was named as a co-conspirator. The state began proceedings to revoke the Whispering Pines HOA charter entirely. Turns out they'd filed as a nonprofit, but had no qualifying community services. No school support, no public maintenance, just a luxury scam wrapped in HOA language. I petitioned the county to issue a demolition order for all unauthorized structures. With Dana's backing, it went through. By the time the bulldozers rolled in, the clubhouse was already abandoned. Windows boarded, golf carts stacked and rusting in the sun. A few locals came out to watch. Some brought lawn chairs. When the main building collapsed under the claw of the excavator, nobody clapped. But I saw a few people nod. Quiet, satisfied. Later that night, I cracked open the crawl space under the cabin where my father kept old letters. Found one I hadn't read before, dated 2 years ago. He wrote about the land, about how he'd never sell it no matter how much they offered. About how some things had to be protected, not just owned. I sat on the porch until the stars came out, listening to coyotes call across the hills, and realized I wasn't just defending a ranch. I was preserving a legacy. And this time, no one was going to take it. The demolition site drew a curious kind of silence the following morning. No machines clanking, no echo of golf balls striking fake turf, no whine of sprinklers misting a stolen lawn. Just the wind brushing across open dirt where the clubhouse used to stand. I walked the grounds with Agent Dana Ortiz again, this time without a folder in her hand or a camera in mine. The evidence had been gathered, the statements sworn. Now came the final chapter. "I need to show you something," she said, stepping over the remains of a crushed patio umbrella. She led me to a spot behind the old putting green where the terrain dipped slightly. A shallow trench had been dug there, probably during the early stages of construction. At the bottom was a rusted pipe, barely visible beneath a tangle of broken PVC and wire. Dana crouched and tapped the pipe with her pen. "It gave a hollow echo, stormwater line," she said, "but it's not connected to anything the county recognizes." I narrowed my eyes. "They build their own system." "Not quite," she said. "We traced this outlet to a culvert 3 miles east. Problem is that culvert feeds into the municipal reservoir. It took a second for that to register. They were dumping runoff into the town's water supply, unfiltered," she said, "and the turf chemicals used on that course, high nitrogen content. Banned in this county since the drought ordinance 5 years ago." A slow anger settled in me. Not the kind that comes with shouting, the kind that hardens your jaw and makes your pulse drum in your ears. "People drink from that reservoir," Dana stood. "We've already notified the health department. They're running tests now. If the contamination levels match what we suspect, this isn't just zoning fraud anymore, it's criminal negligence." I followed her back to the edge of what used to be the parking lot. She paused before getting into her car. "There's one more thing," she said. "The phony deed. We tied the notary's payment to a shell company funded by a PAC. That PAC is registered to a man named Ellis Corbin. The name meant nothing to me. He's a political consultant," Dana added. "Used to work for energy firms. Now he's on retainer for several private development groups, including one that tried to buy your father's land 3 years ago. He's been orchestrating these land grabs all over the state." I crossed my arms. "So this wasn't just about a golf course?" "No," she said. "It was about water rights. Your property sits on the largest undeveloped aquifer access in the county. They didn't care about putting greens. They wanted the subsurface rights. So they built a pretend community to cover their real goal," I said. Dana nodded. "And now that we've laid it out for the state attorney, we're moving forward with racketeering charges. Wire fraud, conspiracy, environmental violations, the whole thing." I watched her drive off before walking the perimeter one last time. I stopped near the spot where Marlene had once barked at me like I didn't belong. Now, the only thing standing there was a cracked walkway leading to nothing. Later that week, I got a subpoena to appear before the grand jury. I wore my father's old blazer, the one he had worn to church and funerals and nowhere else. When I took the stand, I spoke slow and clear. I didn't dress it up. I told them what I saw, what I had found, and what my father would have never allowed. They asked about the threats. About the call I got from the anonymous number. Royce had traced it to a burner phone purchased in Dallas 2 days before that night. The store clerk had ID'd Carlton Baines from a photo lineup. A week later, the indictments came through 6 in total. Marlene Prescott, Carlton Baines. The fake notary, 2 HOA board members, and Ellis Corbin. The charges ranged from fraud to reckless endangerment, all backed by a pile of evidence so high it could have filled a courtroom wall. The health department confirmed elevated nitrate levels in the reservoir, and the county issued a boil notice that same day. Angry residents flooded the town hall, demanding answers. For once, I wasn't the one banging on the door. I returned home to find a letter nailed to my gate. It wasn't a threat this time. It was a petition. 17 signatures from nearby ranchers and homeowners asking me to help form a rural land trust. Not an HOA, a real trust, one that protected parcels from future development and gave landowners legal leverage to push back against corporate encroachment. I called a meeting the next day. 30 people showed up, more than I expected. Some brought folding chairs. Others stood under the oaks out back. We don't need another organization telling us what color to paint our barns, I told them. We need a shield, something that locks this land down and leaves it to our kids the way it was left to us. They agreed, unanimously. We filed the paperwork within the month. The Pine Rock Land Trust, no dues, no board elections. Just a charter that bound us together and kept our land from becoming another casualty in a long-running game of buy, fake, and sell. On the legal side, the state froze all assets tied to the Whispering Pines HOA and its affiliates. The golf course was officially condemned, and the remaining equipment sold at auction. I bought nothing. I didn't want a single reminder of their stain on my soil. As for Marlene, she eventually struck a plea deal. 2 years probation, a ban from serving on any residential board in the state, and a fine that drained her savings. I heard she moved to Arizona. No one sent her off. Carlton Baines wasn't so lucky. He fought the charges and lost. Wire fraud and environmental violations carried real weight in front of a jury. He got 5 years with no chance of early release. Ellis Corbin vanished before the FBI could bring him in, but his name was now on every watch list from here to the Canadian border. Dana promised me they'd get him. I believed her. The kind of people who think they can take what isn't theirs always leave a trail eventually. The ranch is quiet again. I rebuilt the fence line by hand, 1 post at a time. Ruddy helps out when he can. The cattle are back, and the pond's been restored thanks to a grant from the state's Environmental Recovery Fund. Funny how the government moves fast when it's cleaning up its own mess. I found my father's old branding iron last week, buried beneath a pile of cedar planks in the barn. It took some work to get the rust off, but when I fired it up and pressed it to the post at the north gate, the old mark burned clear and strong. Langley Ranch still here, still ours. And now protected in a way it never was before, not by threat, not by force, but by truth, vigilance, and a community that finally stood up and said no more. They came for our land with lies and papers. We answered with facts, fire, and the law, and that was the last time anyone tried to steal a single acre from Pine Rock.